Continue po tayo sa next page po, Sis Maraya. For the when search and seizure may be made without warrant. Okay. So dito po sa reporting, based on the 2014 edition of 1987 Constitution by Hector S. De Leon and Hector M. De Leon Jr., 6 po yung nakalagay. Pero when we search it online, meron po siyang 7. Okay. So, sa instances po, ito po sa when search and seizure may be made without warrant. Last time diniscuss ko po na kailangan po kapag ang isang law enforcer ay magsa-search or maghahalughog ng isang lugar, ng isang vehicle, or ng aresto siya ng sino man or ng sino mang tao, kailangan meron siyang warrant of arrest. Ngayon, pag-usapan po natin, kailan ba katanggap-tanggap sa batas na umiiral sa Pilipinas na dakpin or arestuhin at halughugin ng isang lugar o vehicle nang walang warrant. Una po dito is kapag mayroong consent or waiver. So, sa bawat jurisdiction na territory po kasi iba-iba yung mga regional or yung local court na umiiral sa kanila. So, iba-iba po yung kanilang magiging signee, kumbaga kung yung magiging pagbibigay po ng permit para malaman kung justifiable po ba yung probable cause na nakita dun sa isang incident or sa isang krimen na pinag-uusapan. Okay. Sa pangalawa po, where search is an incident to a lawful arrest. So, paano po ba malalaman na lawful arrest ang isang pag-aresto? So, it is recognized under Section 12 ng Rule 126 of the Rules of Court and by prevailing jurisprudence, in searches incidents to lawful arrest, the arrest must precede the search. Generally, the process cannot be reversed. Nevertheless, a search substantially contemporaneous with an arrest can precede the arrest if the police have probable cause to make the arrest at the outset of the search. So, lagi po natin binabanggit at lagi po natin kailangan dapat tandaan yung probable cause. Kailangan po yung isang para po maging lawful arrest siya kahit wala pong warrant or papel na ipapakita sa inyo na halughugin yung inyong vehicle or yung inyong lugar o bahay. Kapag po yung police o yung pumunta po sa inyong lugar ay nakakita po ng reason or ng probable cause para po halughugin yung bahay nyo dahil sa paglabag or meron pong ginawang krimen. Sa pangatlo po, in the case of contraband or forfeited goods being transported by ship, automobile, or other vehicle where the officer making it has reasonable cause for believing that the latter contains them in view of the difficulty attendant to securing a search warrant. Okay, so dito po sa number 3, meron pong naging problem ang Camp Aguinaldo, kung hindi pa ako nagkakamali. Nagkaroon po ng problem yung Camp Aguinaldo dahil sa marami pong pag-atake ng Ayan, hello po. Naririnig po ako?
Yes po.
Sorry po, nagkaroon lang ng problem po. So, bali ito po, sa pangalawa, sinasabi po dito na yung warrantless arrest ay meron pong requisites na types of arrest to be valid. So, generally speaking, for there to be a lawful arrest, law enforcers must be armed with a valid warrant of arrest. Pero kung wala nga pong valid warrant of arrest na in-issue yung judge upon filing by the public prosecutor para ma-inform yung court about the found probable cause, kasi po yung probable cause and yung letter or warrant of arrest yung magsaserve para madala into trial yung iimbestigahan na tao. So this largely springs from the constitutional provision under Section 2 nga po nitong Article 3 ng Bill of Rights sa 1987 Constitution natin that no search warrant or warrant of arrest shall issue except upon probable cause to be determined personally by the judge after examination. So, yung mga instances po na yung arrest ay magiging effected without warrant under Rule 113 Section 5 of the Revised Rules of Criminal Procedure, a peace officer or a private person may without a warrant arrest a person kapag siya po ay tinatawag na infragrante delicto or in the very act of wrongdoing arrest. So when in the presence of the peace officer, the person to be arrested has committed, is actually committing or is attempting to commit an offense. So para po maging katanggap-tanggap yung yung pagsa-search warrant po sa isang tao or sa isang lugar, kailangan makitaan po na meron siyang kinocommit na offense doon sa kanyang lugar o saan man po siya natagpuan. So, arrest pala po yan naman. Okay, for number 4 po, ayan, dagdag ko pa lang po pala dito sa may number 3 sa case of contraband, kabilang din po dito yung mga makikitaan po ng mga kunyari marijuana, ganyan o kaya ng mga drugs or illegal firearms po kapag po yung automobile ay in-inspect sa mga checkpoints in plain view sight. Kapag sinabi pong plain view sight, ito po yung hindi na kailangang halughugin ng sobra ng pulis, nakikita niya na po sa unang tingin niya pa lang na pinlashlightan niya po yung vehicle. Pang-apat po is where without a search, the possession of articles prohibited by law is disclosed to plain view or is open to eye and hand. Ayun nga po sinabi ko kanina. And 5 is an incident of inspection, supervision and regulation in the exercise of police powers such as inspection of restaurant by health officers, factories by labor inspectors. So dito po sa number 5 na to, ang pinaka-examples po dito is yung mga inspection na ginagawa po ng BIR, ng FDA, ng Bureau of Fire Protection sa mga establishments kung nagpa-follow po ba sila sa supervision and regulation ng specific department. Excuse me po. Tulad po ngayong global pandemic, dahil po sa maraming lumalabas na issue sa presyo ng face mask, sa presyo ng alcohol, sa presyo ng oxygen tank. Yung FDA po at saka yung DTI ay nagkaroon po sila ng mga surprise inspections sa mga stores po dito sa Bangbang, yung mga medical supplies. So yung mga ganun pong search and seizure ay ginagawa po siya ng walang warrant dahil yun po ay responsibility ng mga inspectors from different department para ma-ensure na nagpa-follow or nagko-comply sa supervision and regulations nila yung mga stores na to. Kabilang din po dito yung mga surprise na pag-visit or pag-inspect ng mga ng BIR or revenue examiner sa mga stores kung nagko-comply ba sila dun sa books of accounts nila na naglalaman ng mga sales invoice and information ng sales ng store na yon. Kabilang din dito yung sa mga restaurants kung meron ba silang tamang kalinisan na na-maintain dun sa lugar or dun sa kanilang mga foods. Number 6 is routine searches usually made at the border or at ports of entry in the interest of national security and for the proper enforcement of customs and immigration laws. So ito naman po yung kung nakapunta na po kayo ng mga airport or kung nag-travel po kayo abroad or kung saan mang lugar na ginamit niyo po na travel way is dagat or air travel, very strict po yung mga custom officers or yung mga custom officers sa entrance and sa inspection nila sa lahat po ng passengers. Ngayon, kaya nga po may mga ilang issue from the past sa Philippines na may mga nahuhuli na may dala palang kontrabando, may dala palang illegal firearms, ganun. So ginagawa po yung ganito mga routine searches sa mga border or sa mga ports of entry para po ma-make sure na yung interest of national security ay na-maintain. This is for the proper enforcement of the customs and immigration laws din po. And ayun po, Ito po, may additional po yung tinatawag na stop and frisk. Ang stop and frisk situation po or Terry search na kung tawagin ay nagre-refer po sa case or sa mga instances in which a police officer approaches a person who is acting suspiciously for the purpose of investigating possible criminal behavior in line with the general interest or effective crime prevention and detection. So, yung objective po ng stop and frisk search is to determine the identity of a suspicious individual or to maintain the status quo momentarily while the police officer seeks to obtain more information. So, ilan po sa mga basic criteria ng isang police officer para po masabi na katanggap-tanggap yung kanyang pag-search or yung kanyang pag-hold dun sa isang tao is kapag meron po siyang personal knowledge, kunyari nalaman niya na yung taong yun pala ay posibleng pumatay dun sa isang babae na natagpuan malapit lang dun sa pinanggalingan ng lalaki habang siya ay tumatakbo. Parang mga ganong cases po. So the concept of suspiciousness must be present in the situation in which the police officers find themselves in. And yung next po is yung last na exigent and emergency circumstances. So, ito po yung kaninang nalitaw ako, sorry po. Ito po yung sinasabi ko kanina na case po dun sa Camp Aguinaldo. So, the doctrine of exigent circumstance was applied in People versus De Gracia. So, which was decided during a time of general chaos and disorder brought about dahil nang wala pong warrant. So sinearch po yung kanyang building, tapos natagpuan po doon yung mga high-powered bombs, firearms, and other ammunition. So according to the military, they were not able to secure a search warrant due to ongoing disorder. So ito po yung mga insidente na katanggap-tanggap po yung paghalughog sa isang lugar o sa isang bahay nang wala pong warrant. Kasi unang-una, hindi po makapag-secure yung mga military o yung mga peace officer in charge dun sa search and seizure sa lugar dahil dahil po merong ongoing na disorder, dahil meron nga pong general chaos and disorder dahil sa kudeta na ina-attempt ng mga rightist and mga rebels. Ngayon, dahil po sa within Camp Aguinaldo nga po yun, may mga rebel forces din po and simultaneous firing within the vicinity ng Eurocar building. And aside from that, yung mga korte dahil dun sa kaguluhan ay nakasarado. So wala pong makakapag-issue at that moment ng warrant of arrest. Admittedly, the absence of a search warrant was not squarely put into issue. So, hindi po siya naging issue kasi the court proceeded to delve into legality of the raid due to the gravity of the offense involved. So, in the analysis of the court, they take into consideration the following facts. Yung first is the raid was precipitated by intelligence reports and surveillance on the ongoing rebel activities in the building. Pangalawa is meron pong presence of an unusual quantity of high-powered firearms and explosives in a automobile sales office could not be justified. And pangatlo, there was an ongoing chaos at the time because of the simultaneous and intense firing within the vicinity of the office and in nearby Camp Aguinaldo. And four is the ports and the surrounding areas were obviously closed. Excuse me po. And for that matter, the building and houses therein were deserted. So, ito po yung isa sa mga actual and real scenario na pwede pong mag-search and seizure without warrant. Okay. For ano naman po tayo, next po is yung sa warrantless arrest. So, ito na po yung sa pag-aresto. Ayan, nagkalituhan lang po kanina. So, dito po, sinasabi na peace officer or private person may granted delito or in the very act of wrongdoing arrest. Kunyari po, yung isang tao nga ay kinag-commit siya ng pagpatay, may hawak siyang baril at nakatutok dun sa isang tao, kailangan po maunawaan nung police officer or nung private person na makakakita nung senaryo na yon, ano yung rason. Kasi dito po sa under rule na 113 section of revised rules of criminal procedure, kailangan daw po bukod sa makikita na actually committing ng isang crime, kailangan po mayroong reason. So doon na po lalabas kung meron po bang galit yung may hawak ng barel, or pinoprotektahan niya lang po ba yung sarili niya laban dun sa isa pang tao na tinututukan niya ng barel. So sa ganung sitwasyon po, maaaresto po yung may hawak ng barel, at syempre po dadalhin na siya for trial sa court para malaman kung ano po yung talagang nangyari, or kung ano po yung kanyang reason bakit siya po ay mag-a-attempt or hindi ng pagpatay. Pangalawa po is when an offense has just been committed and he has probable cause to believe based on personal knowledge of acts or circumstances that the person to be arrested committed. So ito po yung tinatawag din na hot pursuit. So kailangan po lagi na may personal knowledge po yung mismong mag-aaresto doon sa kung sino man po yung gumawa nung krimen. Pangatlo is when the person to be arrested is a prisoner who has escaped from a penal establishment or place where he is serving final judgment. So pangatlo po, pwede pong hulihin agad-agad kahit walang warrant of arrest ang isang tao na tumakas sa kulungan, or meron po siyang temporarily confinement na, or meron po siyang case na pending na dapat siya ay nasa loob ng bilibid. So in cases falling under paragraphs A and B po, justifying warrantless arrest, the person arrested without a warrant shall be delivered to the nearest police station. So yung kunyari po na aktuhan or nakita or nalaman ng pulis na siya yung pumatay or siya gumawa ng krimen na specifically na lumabag sa batas, dadalhin po sila sa nearest na police station dapat. As discussed in the last article, when a person is lawfully arrested without a warrant involving an offense which requires a preliminary investigation. Warrantless arrest. Ayun po, tama po yung sabi ni Angel. Plain view doctrine po yung sa una, yung nakikita mismo sa harap ng law enforcer. As in, kitang-kita yung suspect. And yung pangalawa is yung hot pursuit na pa nakita ng police pero hindi maaresto dahil hindi nahuli and escape from penal establishment. And then, ayun, as discussed nga po dun sa last article, yung sa preliminary investigation inquest by the public prosecutor will follow instead of a regular preliminary investigation. Pursuant na siya sa Section 7, Rule of 112 of the Revised Rules of Criminal Procedure, hindi na po dito sa may Article 3 ng Bill of Rights. So, para po maging valid yung in flagrante delicto or yung warrant of arrest po kapag plain view doctrine is kailangan po may probable cause na nag-effect, and referring to those facts and circumstances which would lead a reasonable, discreet, and prudent man to believe that an offense has been committed by the person sought to be arrested. So after ng valid warrantless arrest, the officer may also conduct a valid warrantless search, which is an incidental to such arrest. So kung nakita na po in plain sight na yung taong yon ay gumawa ng krimen, maaaring at that moment po, yung police officer na in charge po dun or nakakita nung crime, is pwede niya rin pong ituloy yung warrantless arrest into warrantless search para po makita yung iba pang mga possible na evidences to support dun po sa filing of case against the crime being committed by the accused. Ayan. So, bali, ayun lang po for Section 2. Magpuproceed na po sa Section 3 at i-report po yan ni Sis Janela.
Okay. May I intervene?
Okay po, sir.
Okay. So, Article 3, no? Specifically the Bill of Rights under Section 1.
Yes po.
States that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, and property,
Yes po.
and nor shall be deprived of the equal protection of our laws.
Apa.
The exercise of every right carries with it a corresponding obligation.
Yes po.
Who says that? Spider-Man, di ba? Sinabi niya rin
Opo.
yan.
A great power
With
comes
great
with
powers comes great responsibility. Okay. It is because, halimbawa, yung ating tahanan, gaano man siya kaliit, kaharian natin yan. So no one can trespass. And in defense you can defend yourself. Meaning, pwede kang pumatay kapag pinasok yung bahay mo at ikaw ay gagawa ng masama. O hold upin ka, papatayin ka. Okay? So, there are circumstances which the law, in recognition of our inherent right to life, liberty, and property. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, kaysa unahan kang patayin at pinasok ang bahay mo nang wala mong pahintulot, nakita mong may kutsilyo o may dalang barel, inunahan mo, binaril mo siya agad. Okay? So, kaya nakikita nyo, merong mga kaso na yung mga halimbawa, subdivision, may mga gwardya, may pumasok, nagnanakaw ng mga materyales. O, diba? May produkto yung pananim mo. Walang pahintulot, kinukuha yung mga bunga. So, in those circumstances, the defense is justifiable. Okay? At binibigyan din ng batas yung karapatan din ng Estado na mag-issue ng warrant of arrest at ng search warrant. Although mahigpit siya, no, sa pamantayan, kinakailangan kung ano yung isa-search mo, anong address, ano yung items na nakalagay, specific, no? Hindi siya po pwedeng walang personal knowledge.
Yes po.
Okay? Kasi hindi naman pwedeng mag-search ka ng mag-search lagi tapos sasabi, ay mali po pala, sorry po. So mahigpit ang husgado. No? Kaya lang, no, in reality, ganyan, nababayaran na rin ngayon. No? Hindi na rin nasusunod. Hinahanapan nila ng loopholes yung mga batas, no? As real talk lang tayo. So, nakakapag-issue, pati nga mga TRO, nai-issue yan. No? Which is supposed to be napakahirap dapat. No? Kung babasahin mo yung tenets ng requirements sa batas for all legal intents and purposes. But you know, in reality, no, minsan magkakasabwat din yung parehong abogado. Nag-uusap. Okay, money talks. No? I mean, the law is very very stringent, no, for issuing the warrant of arrest and the search warrant. Likewise, the law also provides 3 ordinary circumstances wherein an ordinary citizen can arrest a person without a warrant. Okay, number 1 is that when a crime has been committed, kagagawa lang ng krimen, nakita mo, so it is a hot pursuit, no? With your very eyes. No? Classic example, may asawa ka, no, nakita mo, nakikipagtalik sa ibang lalaki, pagbukas mo ng pinto, nasa ibabaw yung asawa mong babae, nagulat, no? So yung asawa mo, tumayo, ay yung lalaki naman, tumalon sa bintana. Ngayon, binaril mo. Or nasaksak mo siya, pero hindi na pa naman namatay. O nabaril mo, tinamaan mo, tumatakbo pa rin siya. Naghabulan kayo. Taga Manila ka, nakarating na kayo ng Rizal. Tapos doon mo napatay sa Taytay. You are justified because that is hot pursuit. Because a crime has been committed. Adultery and concubinage has been committed. Adultery on the part of the woman and concubinage on the part of the paramour. Okay? So, you're justified. Number 2, the plain view doctrine in flagrante delicto. Right in your very eyes, you can arrest a person who is actually committing a crime. He is committing a crime at your very own eyes. Okay, you can arrest the person caught in the act. Plain view doctrine in flagrante delicto. Okay? Of course, you have the evidence kasi nakita mo, sinaksak niya yung so kunin mo yung panaksak, ayan ang ebidensya. Nasaksak. So a corroborating witness is required also to attest that a crime is actually been committing. Okay, and number 3, you can arrest a person if he is a fugitive from justice. There is a bench warrant or standing warrant of arrest issued by competent court because the person escapes the prison or he is a fugitive from justice. So you note that these 3 exemplary circumstances can be done by ordinary citizens, not just by police officers or persons in authority, but ordinary persons like all of us can arrest a person without a warrant by following those extraordinary circumstances. Okay? So you note that in the hot pursuit, even if you killed the paramour, you can be justified. There are landmark cases decided by the Supreme Court, a precedent that has been established by our jurisprudence to invalidate the claim of murder by killing, but it is justified under those 3 circumstances, specifically the hot pursuit, or that a crime has been committed and you pursue the offenders. The law grants you a justifying argument for doing so. Okay? So you continue the report?
Okay po, sir. Thank you po.
Hello po, naririnig po ako?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you po. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. Ako po si Janina Nicole Baluyot. Yung report ko po itatapal po sections 3, 4, and 5 ng Article 3 Bill of Rights. So beginning po tayo with section 3, which is the right to privacy. Based on the first provision po, nakalagay po dito, the privacy of communication and correspondence shall be inviolable or can never be broken, infringed, or dishonored, except upon lawful order of the court or when public safety or order requires otherwise as prescribed by law. Next po, any evidence obtained in violation of this or the preceding section shall be inadmissible or hindi siya maaaring magamit as evidence in any court proceedings for any purposes. So for the meaning of the right of privacy, ito po ay concisely defined as the right to be left alone. Ito rin ay dinidefine bilang karapatan ng isang tao to be free from any undesired publicity or i-disclose ang kanyang communication correspondence. Ito rin po yung right natin to live without any unwanted interferences, lalo na interference by the public kung yung mga matters in question ay hindi naman po concerned yung public dito. Next po, next slide pa po. Thank you. So, for the basis and purpose of the right, una po dito yung right existing in the state of nature. So, the right to privacy po ay kinikilala siya or kinoconsider siya as belonging to the class of the rights kung saan ang bawat tao or every human being ay nakakapag-possess ng mga ganitong klaseng rights in their natural state. Meaning, hindi ito maaaring mawala or hindi niya ito pwede i-surrender just by becoming a member of organized society. Ang foundation ng karapatan na ito lies in the belief na every person does have the inherent right para i-enjoy niya yung kanyang private life without having any incidents kung saan yung matters in his private life ay magiging public against his will. This right is also equated with the right to live as one chooses under the law, free from any interferences in the pursuit of one's choices. Next is the right designed to secure enjoyment of one's private life. So, the right to privacy, accorded protection siya para ma-secure natin yung enjoyment ng ating private life. Without this right, sinasabi na one cannot possibly live in peace and with self-respect and to be truly happy. By the above constitutional provision, ito ay isang express recognition ng ating right to privacy, specifically in regards to our communication correspondence. Sinasabi na ang bawat tao may karapatan to communicate and to correspond with one another without having to worry na yung state biglang magpapry or mangingialam into our communications correspondence with one another and even to subject our concerns or matters by the ever-pervading police power of the state. For context po, the state does have the right to pry into our private matters at magagamit nila ito or sa pamamagitan ng paggamit ng police power, which I will explain further later po. So for example, ang ating letters and messages, madalas i-carry sila by the agencies of the government. So unless meron tayong mga adequate or proper safeguards provided for, ang ating privacy, maaari siyang ma-violate and great harm may inflict upon the citizens as a result. So ito yung parang mga examples kung bakit importante yung ating right to privacy. Next is the relationship with right against unreasonable searches and seizure. First dito is yung aspect of right to be secure in one's person. So the constitutional provision on the right of privacy, kina-complement nito or ini-implement yung security ng citizens against any unreasonable searches and seizures. So this right is but an aspect of the right to be secure in one's person. Then there's also the privacy of communication and correspondence. So the right to privacy, kino-cover niya lahat ng intrusions and arbitrary interference sa private affairs ng mga tao. Much broader to in scope in comparison to the right of communication, or the right to privacy of communication. Because the right to privacy in communication, meron siya mga specific references sa mga uri ng komunikasyon, tulad ng mga telephone, radio, etc., pati na rin sa correspondence. But the right to privacy, ito naman yung against mga searches of tangible material objects, tulad ng mga his persons, mga bahay niya, papers, or effects. So, there are cases kung saan magiging violative or magiging violating sa guarantee given by the privacy provision kung yung evidence na gagamitin ay na-obtain sa pamamagitan ng mga telephone wires or through the use ng isang detectaphone. Although hindi talaga siya technically nakakakuha or nagtitake or seizure ng mga tangible and material objects because the evidences are only taken through the sense of hearing, yung technique employed likewise naman nako-constitute niya yung searches and seizures which can be seen again under Section 2. So next po, for the limitations on the right of privacy of the communications, una is permissible interference. So the right of privacy of communication correspondence, or simply known as the right to privacy of communication, hindi siya maaaring ma-considered violated kung ang interferences ay nagawa sa pamamagitan ng two ways. First is yung upon lawful order of the court or when public safety or order requires otherwise as prescribed by law. So for the intervention of the court, ang unang limitation stated, dapat ma-interpret natin ito in the context the requirements for the issuance of a search warrant. So as long as mayroong court order, maaaring ma-search or yun nga, ma-interfere yung ating right to privacy of communication. For the second limitation naman, as nakalagay dito, if public safety is otherwise jeopardized, the state does have the right to subject our right and magamit yung police power para maprotektahan yung public safety. In some cases though, yung intervention ng court hindi daw siya essential. As we all know, the judicial process is slow. So, kung yung judge ay nagko-contemplate pa lang or he's still not contemplating his decision, yung objectionable materials, maaari na sila nakakapag-cause ng damages that could have been easily averted. So, in those cases, maaari makuha yung mga ilang articles without any court orders. However, yung pag-exercise pa rin ng power na ito by an executive officer without court order, it can still be subject to judicial review and where the existence of the limitation is being questioned by an aggrieved party. So for evidences illegally obtained, we have three aspects of it. Una po yung inadmissible. So any evidence na nakuha in violation against the right of any unreasonable search and seizures and the right to privacy of communication correspondence, automatically magiging inadmissible or hindi siya maaaring magamit as evidence in any court proceedings, whether judicial or administrative. Next po. So for the reason kung bakit siya magiging inadmissible in any, kahit gaano pa competent yung evidence na yun, if it's unlawfully acquired, yung exclusion niya sa court proceedings, yung hindi paggamit niya, it's the only practical way para makapag-enforce tayo ng mga constitutional guarantees. And lastly po is the right of the owner. So since yung evidence ay illegally nakuha at hindi siya maaaring magamit in any court proceedings, the owner does have the right para ibalik sa kanya yung mga articles seized. Unless na lang na yung mga articles na yun by themselves are prohibited or are forbidden by law. Tulad ng mga illegal drugs or mga unlicensed firearms, hindi siya maaaring ibalik sa owner. So next is the meaning of writ of habeas data. So ito po ay isang judicial remedy available sa kahit sinong individual kung saan ang kanilang right to privacy in life, liberty, or security ay na-violate or nati-threaten ng isang unlawful act or omission ng isang public official, employee, or ng isang private individual. Kung saan yung entities na yun ay nakapag-engage sa gathering, collecting, or storing of data or information regarding sa isang tao, sa kanyang family, home, and correspondence of the aggrieved party. Next po is the purpose of the writ. So ano ba yung purpose nito? So the writ of habeas data together with the writ of habeas corpus and writ of amparo, kinakomplete nila yung legal armory and remedy ng isang citizens against any violations and threats against their rights to life, liberty, and security and information. So yung purpose ng writ na ito ay para ma-secure ang privacy ng individual by the means of regulating and processing ng kanyang personal information or data tungkol sa kanya. It also individual the right para malaman niya ano ba yung mga information na nakikip about sa kanya and para saan ba yung information na yun, what's the use and what's the purpose of the data being collected. Hindi lamang siya nabibigyan ng karapatan para nga-access yung mga documents or records that would usually be close to them tulad ng mga police or military records, pero nabibigyan din yung individual ng karapatan para questionin yung data na yun and demand that the said data be either deleted, destroyed, or rectified. So how does the writ operate? Any aggrieved party may file a petition in court for the writ of habeas data. In cases naman ng mga extralegal killings or mga enforced disappearances, ang petition maaaring ma-file ng kahit sinong member of the immediate family or collateral relative ng aggrieved family within the fourth degree of consanguinity or affinity. Then the court shall immediately issue the writ, and then it will be served upon the respondent, who in turn will file a written return or answer under oath with supporting affidavits. So the hearing on the petition ay magiging summary, and once the allegations are proven to be true, the court shall then enjoin the act complained, and the writ shall be denied. Next po. Next by Section 4. So, no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech, of expression, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. So, for the meaning of freedom of speech, of expression, and of the press, ang constitutional freedom of speech and expression of the press, or otherwise simply known as the freedom of expression, ini-imply po dito yung karapatan natin to freely utter and publish whatever one so pleases nang walang mga restraint or fear of any subsequent punishment or sanctions. Ito din yung constitutional guarantee natin na maprotektahan tayo against any responsibility for freely expressing ourselves as long as hindi po tayo nakakapag-violate ng law or nakakasira sa karakter ng isang tao, kanilang reputasyon or business. Included din po dito yung karapatan natin to circulate what's published. Next po. For the scope of freedom of expression, the constitutional guarantee of freedom of expression, ini-include dito yung mga specific guarantees of free speech and free press, pati na rin yung rights of assembly and petition, the rights to form associations or societies na hindi contrary to the law, and the right to religious freedom. So, for the scope of the term speech, expression, and of the press, for the term speech and expression, kinakover po nito lahat ng uri ng oral utterances tulad ng mga protesta bilang ekspresyon ng ating opinion about subjects of public concern, but kinakover din dito yung picketing or yung silent expression ng isang tao sa kung ano mang meron sa kanyang isip, mga sarili niyang opinion. Kinakover din po dito yung display of a flag and salute to the flag. Ini-embrace din po dito yung expression ng by means of motion picture and electronic means of communication. And for the term press, kinakover naman po ng term na to lahat ng uri ng publications tulad ng newspaper, periodicals, mga magazines, books, handbills, leaflets, etc. And radio and television bilang instruments of mass communication ay maaari din natin i-include sa term na to. Next po. So for the importance of the guarantee, first, pinopromote nito ang growth of the individual and of the nation. So if man is not free para i-communicate niya yung ideas to others, hindi lamang ang kanyang sariling moral and intellectual development ang masistifle or may hinder, but his fellow men, yung mga kasama niya sa lipunan, ay madedeprive din sa benefit and stimulation na maaaring ma-impart sa kanila sa pamamagitan ng communications between one another. So unless ang mga individuals ay may liberty or freedom na makapag-discuss ng mga various issues na makapag-confront sa kanilang community, the government, pati yung whole web of social relationships in the search of truth and perfection ay may impede. So freedom of expression therefore is inalienable or hindi siya maaaring ihiwalay sa atin because this is a human right that flows from the very nature of man. So as such, itong mga, this expression, dapat siya ma-nurture and maprotektahan ng state. Because without this right, ang full and proper growth ng individual, ni the nation, ay magiging invariably stunted. Next importance of the guarantee is that it also makes it possible for us ma-scrutinize yung acts and conducts ng public officials. So no one can doubt the importance of the right. So magagamit natin ito para ma-canvas natin yung acts of public men, pati na rin yung tendencies ng public measure, masisensure natin boldly yung conducts of our rulers, and masiscrutinize din natin yung policies and plano ng gobyerno. If we were to preserve this right, public opinion must be enlightened and political vigilance ay dapat i-encourage. And lastly, our last importance is that it also ensures a responsive and popular government. Sa pamamagitan lamang ng free debate and free exchange ng mga idea, ang government, this is a way for the government to ensure na magiging responsive pa rin sila sa will of the people and for peaceful change to be affected. Ang mga tao din dapat may kakayahan sila to voice out their sentiments and aspirations para maging active participants sila sa political process, which also includes mga public discussions, referendas, initiatives, recalls, plebiscites, and elections, pati na rin maging participants sila in the national development. Next po. So the freedom of expression is not absolute, meaning may limitations pa rin tong karapatan na ito. First is that it is subject to regulation by the state. So the right to freedom of speech and of the press, essential siya sa pag-preserve and operate ng ating stable democracy. However, even in this right, hindi siya absolute at all times and under every circumstances. It will always be subject to some form of regulation by the state. Para hindi ito maabuso at hindi siya makapag-cause ng injury sa right of the community or society. So, ang power na ito, maaaring ma-exercise siya ng state sa pamamagitan ng paggamit ng kanilang police power. Through the police power, maaari nila ma-promote or maprotektahan ang public welfare. Then, it also is subjecting one to liability when abused. So, ang sino mang individual na nakapagsalita or nakapaggawa ng mga slanderous or libelous speeches against another person, maaari siyang ma-penalize. Furthermore, any types of lewd or obscene speeches, hindi rin sila entitled to any constitutional protection, nor are fighting words. Kasi yung mga salita daw na ito, by their very utterance, nakakakos sila ng injury or makakapag-provoke din sa ibang tao to attack, so it can cause chaos. For example, ang isang tao wala pong karapatang biglang tumayo sa in a crowded theater and then bigla na lang siya sisigaw ng may apoy para lang makakita ng confusion, possible panic, or para lang sabihin niya na, oh, I'm just exercising my freedom to express myself. Hindi niya maaaring magamit ito as a justification. He will be punished. Additionally, mga seditious speeches din po, outside din sila ng protection of the Constitution. So unless na lang yung mga sasabihin natin ay nagpo-fall under these limitations, or sa mga kategory na ito, the right to free speech is still absolute and any person cannot be prosecuted for whatever they say or write dahil nag-exercise lamang sila ng kanilang freedom of speech or expression. Next po. So for the justification for abridgment of freedom of speech and of the press, abridgment means curtailment of rights or pag-reduce or restrict ng ating karapatan. So ma-justify natin to mainly for one reason, which is the clear and present danger rule. So the abridgment of the liberty can only be justified kung meron nag-exist a substantial danger kung saan ang speech na nasasabi ay it could most likely lead to an evil. In those cases, the government does have the right to step in and to prevent it. Again, kinikilala ito bilang clear and present danger rule. So how does the rule apply? Kung gaano man ka-substantial yung danger and gaano ka-immediate yung evil na magre-result dito, nakadepende po siya sa nature of the interest threatened. So for example, ang isang tao na nagdi-distribute or mga tao na nagdi-distribute ng handbills para makapag-announce ng public meeting, hindi sila maaaring ma-deny ng karapatan to do so merely kasi pwede siyang i-argue na may clear and present danger that the streets will become cluttered. Although a town or a city does have the right to keep their streets clean, ang interest in keeping the streets clean, hindi pa rin niya ma-justify yung suppression of speech ng mga taong yun. On the other hand, ang isang conspiratorial group, maaari silang ma-punish for publicly advocating ang overthrow ng isang gobyerno. Kahit gaano pa kaliit yung chances na mangyari talaga yung overthrow na ito, yung interest natin in preserving the government against any type of violent overthrows, mas substantial pa rin siya in keeping the streets clean. So while the former, or yung conspiratorial group scenario na nadja-justify niya yung restrictions on free speech, kahit gaano pa ka-remote yung danger, nadja-justify pa rin yung restriction. However, yung keeping the streets clean, it's not enough para ma-justify natin yung restriction ng free speech even though the danger is immediate. Kasi yun nga, it lies within the seditious speeches na maaaring makaresulta in any violent overthrow. Next po. So, for the meaning of right of assembly and the right of petition, first is the right of assembly. Ito po yung karapatan on the part of the citizens na makapag-meet sila peaceably for consultation in regards or in respect sa mga public affairs. And then the right of petition naman po, yung karapatan ng kahit sinong tao or group of people na makapag-apply sa kahit anong appropriate branch or office ng gobyerno para makapag-redress ng kanilang grievances. But ito rin po yung parang karapatan natin to apply without any fear of penalties or mga sanctions to do so. So ano ba yung relationship ng rights na ito sa freedom of speech and of the press? Una, it complements the right of free speech. So the right to assemble and the right to petition, mga necessary consequences sila ng ating republican institution. So it also complements the right of free speech. Lahat ng mga rights na ito, although hindi sila identical sa one another, hindi sila magkakapareho, they are still cognate and inseparable from one another. So for the application of clear and present danger rule, as in the cases ng freedom of speech and of the press, pati na rin sa rights of assembly and petition, lahat ng ito nag-include at the very least immunity natin from any previous restraint or kaya kahit any subsequent punishment dahil lamang nag-exercise tayo ng ating mga karapatan na ito. Although maaari silang ma-restrain or ma-interfere pa rin kung may clear and present danger of a substantive evil. In these cases, the government can step in and to prevent it under its police power. Next po. So lastly, Section 5. So no law shall be made respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination or preference shall forever be allowed, and no religious test shall be required for the exercise of civil or political rights. So Ano ba yung meaning of religious freedom? The constitutional guarantee of religious freedom is sinasabing karapatan ng isang tao to worship God at i-entertain niya lahat ng such religious views na nakakapag-appeal sa kanyang individual conscience. Hindi rin siya maaaring madiktahan or hindi rin siya pwedeng pakialaman ng kahit sinong tao or power, whether civil or ecclesiastical. Pino-forbid din under this constitutional guarantee ang mga restriction by law or regulation of freedom of conscience and freedom na makapag-adhere sa kahit anong religious organization or form of worship. And dapat the individuals should be free to choose what religion they want to adhere to. Next is the meaning of religion. Next po. Thank you. So, religion in its broadest sense, ini-include po dito lahat ng uri ng belief in the existence ng mga superior beings na nakakapag-exercise ng power over human beings at nakakapag-impose ng rules of conduct with future state of rewards or punishment. This also has references sa paniniwala ng isang tao sa kanyang Diyos, sa mga obligations na nakakapag-impose ng kanilang doctrine to His being and character, pati na rin yung obedience sa doctrine and sa will ng kanilang God. So, in terms of the aspects of religious freedom, as guaranteed by the Constitution, religious freedom does have two aspects. Una po dito is the separation of church and state, which is secured in the first sentence of the provision, and the freedom of religious profession and worship, which is in the second sentence of the provision. Next po. So, for the freedom of religious profession and worship, katulad lamang ng religious freedom, meron din po siyang dalawang aspeto. First is the freedom to believe in a religion. Lahat ng tao may absolute right to believe in whatever he or she wishes believe in. At ang state, they may not compel religious belief or makakapag-deny sa taong yun ng kahit anong uri ng karapatan or privileges dahil lamang sa kanyang paniniwala or the lack thereof. Yung state, it cannot inquire into the truth or para malaman niya kung gaano ba ka-valid ang religious doctrine, hindi nila ito maaaring gawin. And in theory, ang religious belief by itself, hindi siya maaaring by any degree whatsoever maka-apekto sa public interest. And freedom to act in accordance with such belief. So, the right to act in accordance sa sariling paniniwala, hindi siya and cannot ever be absolute. Again, conduct remains subject to regulation and even prohibition. So, yung prohibitions na to, they are made in the name of protection of society. So, ang religion, hindi siya maaaring magamit na justification para ma-justify natin ang isang action or the refusal natin to act inconsistent with the public safety, health, morals, or general welfare of society. Or magamit natin to as justification dahil nakapag-violate tayo ng criminal law. So in short, walang sino mang may karapatan to refuse to defend the country in time of war, to refuse to pay taxes, or makapag-practice ng polygamy, or makapag-invade sa karapatan ng iba, all in the name of religious freedom. Hindi na natin maaaring magamit ang religious freedom para makapag-compel tayo ng iba to salute to the flag, to sing the national anthem, and to recite the patriotic pledge, etc. And hindi na natin ito maaaring magamit as justification para mapatalsik ang isang tao sa kanyang trabaho or makapag-expel ng isang student from their school dahil lang sa kanilang paniniwala or again, the lack thereof. So, next po is the right to disseminate religious beliefs. First is the enjoyment of religious profession and relationship with the right to believe. So by the constitutional guarantee ng free exercise and worship, kasama po dito yung karapatan natin ma-disseminate yung religious beliefs and information. Because the right to believe and to worship, hindi sila maaaring maging complete kung wala rin tayong constitutional right na makapag-share ng ating paniniwala sa ibang tao and even to seek to win them over our faith. Kasama din dito yung sa pamamagitan ng pagbigay ng mga analysis of contrary views and even solicitation of financial assistance in carrying the truth to others. And there's also the justification for restraint of right. So, lahat ng uri ng restraint on the right to disseminate religious ideas and information, maaari lamang siya ma-justify, katulad lang ng ibang restraints sa freedom of expression and the such. They can only be justified as long as they are on the grounds that there is a clear and present danger of any substantive evil. For example, in cases of disruption of public peace, the state can or has the right to prevent it. Again, sa pamamagitan din ng paggamit ng police power, maaari nila magawa yun. So for instances, ang mga public official, for example, kung gagamit po sila ng mga discretionary power na makapag-grant or withhold ng mga permits na sa distribution ng religious publications, maaari siya maka-abridge sa karapatan or sa freedom of religion and of the press and of the speech na hindi ito maaaring mangyari. And any infringement of religious freedom, maaari lamang siya justify only to the smallest extent necessary para maka-avoid tayo ng grave danger to public welfare and security. Next po. So, license fee or tax on sale of religious articles. Una dito yung permission or condition for exercise of right. So, ang karapatan ng isang tao na maniwala in a religious belief, it carries with it the right to disseminate their beliefs. So, ang pag-impose ng license or permit fees sa mga benta or sa peddling is trying to sell by going from house to house or place to place. So, ang pag-peddle ng isang religious organization ng kanilang religious literature and other materials, kung ito ay conducted not for the purpose of profit, maaari siya makapag-impair or weaken damage sa ating constitutional guarantee of the free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship.